There is actually an intention, you go into the scene and one of the characters wants something and you have an emotion and the other character has an emotion as well, and something happened before, and what happened before is very important. So what I'm telling you now, which is exactly what you need to know when you start writing a scene, is exactly what an actor needs to know when he starts improvising.
You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. And this episode is brought to you by Deborah Owen of the CPA and business management firm Owen & DeSalvo. I have known Deborah, it seems like, forever. She is brilliant. She is capable. You need to have her on your team. If you need CPA or business management help, especially for entertainment, call Owen & DeSalvo. For this episode, I got to speak with Christina Kallas. Christina is a writer and a professor, but also a director and filmmaker. She made the film 20 Seconds of Happiness and most recently premiered The Rainbow Experiment at Slamdance. She has a very fresh and thoughtful approach to filmmaking and working with actors that I think really resonates. This is a masterclass. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. And I'm doing a big push right now for website subscribers. So please go to the website and sign up if you haven't already. I promise I don't inundate you with emails, but I do send some to let you know what is coming up. And there are some exciting things coming up in the next couple of months that you don't want to miss. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbay, and now on Spotify and iHeartRadio. Now, before we begin talking to Christina, I wanted to check in with a prior guest, Lane Allison. I gave her a quick call. So I wanted to check in with Lane Allison, who I interviewed, it's got to be more than a year ago now. And Lane, you created that web series.
Yes, After Pluto.
Thank you. And also you're very involved with the Open Fist Theater Company, which is amazing. So I just wanted to check in. What are you up to now? Because I know that you have a performance coming up that we should all go to.
Yes, we do. We opened this weekend with a political pop-up event, basically titled 1 Year Later. And we're celebrating, or not celebrating as it were, 1 year later into Trump's presidency and all the many things that go with that, from the Me Too movement to missing Hillary to immigration to just general sociological changes that have overtaken us for better or worse.
It's been an incredible year, hasn't it?
Indeed, it has.
Yeah, I remember seeing your performance a year ago that was very political, and it was so funny and so smart and so delicious, and I can't wait to see what you guys have done with it now after this incredible year we had.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really neat. We have writers from all across the country that have submitted stuff that we went through, and I think our committee ended up reading almost 200 scripts and paring it all down. And so it's the cream of the crop, and it's really powerful stuff. But it's also really funny too. And it's an evening that takes you up and down and all around. It's wonderful.
I love it. Okay, where can they find you? Where can they buy tickets?
Okay, so go to openfist.org for tickets. And then you can also find us if you want to just walk up one night. That's cool too. We're at 3269 Casitas at Atwater Village Theater, and running through March 3rd on Fridays and Saturdays at 8 and Sundays at 7.
Well, I can't wait. I'm going to go.
Yay!
All right, thanks, Lane.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now, this just in, I just heard from Lane right before I went to press that they've been extended for a week. So now you can go through March 10th. Okay, without further ado, here's Christina. Okay, well, I'd love to start with talking a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and then I really want to get into your work because I think it is so interesting and so unique. Mm-hmm. So you live in New York City now?
I do, yes.
Are you originally from Germany?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated.
Okay, tell me all about it.
The easy answer or the simple answer is I'm a world citizen. The more complicated answer is I was born and raised in Greece. So I'm Greek by blood and heritage. And then I moved pretty early on to Berlin, where I spent many, many years. and I was Berlin based till I came to New York. And so, it's a little bit more complicated.
You're a citizen of the world.
Yeah, I kind of retain all these homes, and I feel like at home in all those places. And so that's why I'm saying, I feel like there's not an easy answer to that.
Which even just makes it more delicious, really.
Yeah, although New York is an amazing place to be for that, because it's very international, and you kind of feel like when you come from different places, you do feel at home in New York, because it has that international aspect to it.
It is incredible that way. It kind of feels like the capital of the world.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, let's hope.
I mean, without sounding too American about it, but it really does, because everybody is up there.
Right.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your path, because you've recently directed at least 2, if not more, of these incredible films, but it sounds like you came up through writing. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. So my background is I've been a screenwriter for a very long time, and I still consider writing, one of the most important aspects of filmmaking. And I think that, I made a number of feature films when I was based in Berlin and in Europe in general, and as a writer or as a producer. And I also worked as a writer on 2 TV shows, and I kind of have a very wide spectrum of experiences as a filmmaker. So I came to directing late. I came to directing after I relocated to New York. And now no one can stop me.
Well, I hope they don't. And you also teach writing, don't you?
I do. I teach, and that is an interesting aspect to it, because I'm a film studies person and I'm a professor of practice as well. So I have a PhD in film studies. So I teach, I teach courses that, courses like Major Women Filmmakers, which I'm about to start, or American TV drama, or independent American independent cinema. Like classic film studies, survey courses. But I also teach, practical courses like screenwriting or script analysis. It's
wonderful.
Yeah, it's the combination. And I think, it's very important for me, because it kind of, the one informs the other. I'm a cinephile. I'm really, I'm a passionate cinema lover, so the one thing informs the other in a way.
It all goes together. Now, talk about how did you make the transition into directing? How did you know, this is what I'm going to do now, and making that jump?
To be honest, I wonder myself. I kind of think that I feel like this is what I was meant to do. I feel like this is really where I'm happiest from everything that I've done in my whole life. And I've done a lot of things, and I feel that I sometimes ask myself, why did it take you so long to get here? And I think one of the the obvious answer is because I'm a woman, and
it takes us a minute sometimes.
Yeah, it's a male dominated profession. I mean, it's not a secret anymore, right? So it wasn't the obvious thing to do. It wasn't what, came to mind, or what I felt like I'm not ready. You know what I mean? I felt like I need to sort of get, I don't know, it just didn't cross my mind for a very long time. And then I feel like, sometimes I'm sad about it, and sometimes I think, no, it's good that way, because the films that I make are very complex, and they kind of require a maturity in terms of the craft, but also in terms of the content. And I don't know if I would have had that maturity, let's say 5 or 10 years ago. So
yeah, that's actually a very mature perspective on it.
Yeah, well.
And here we are.
Yeah, I guess, that's that. No, it really, I really wonder sometimes, what kind of films I would have made if I had started earlier directing. So basically, it came, yeah, that's the short answer. Yes,
It came at the time it was meant to come.
exactly.
As
Yeah,
everything pretty much does.
right.
Now, I was just, as I was telling you, I was just in the middle of watching your film 42 Seconds of Summer.
Of happiness, but summer is happiness. So happiness is summer, and
Sorry.
summer is happiness.
Let me say that again.
The titles are the title is unusual, so I've heard a lot of variations of it. I have friends who keep insisting, keep calling it 48 seconds for some reason. I said, well, you clearly need more happiness.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
But that's okay.
But it's so many things are striking about it, because I really feel like it's like nothing I've ever seen. It's
Thank you.
for the one, it's an ensemble piece, and everything is happening at the same time, and you're such a fly on the wall in the middle of it. It's just fascinating. And I've read a little bit about you, and I know you have this really distinct philosophy and process that you go through with actors, and I would love to dig into that a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the question. How do you work with actors to get there? Because I'm listening to the dialogue and I'm thinking, did you really write all that dialogue, or is some of it improvised? Is some of it workshopped? Like, how does this all come together for you?
Yeah. Well, the again, to make it very, just to give you an introduction, and then I'll go more into detail. I feel that a lot of that acting or performance is not being taken as for as important as it is. The same way as with writing, for me, writing and acting are the two, most important aspects, and the most beautiful cinematography and the most beautiful sound design, cannot really make up for if there's something missing in those two things. And I feel that it's kind of I'm my ambition was to get a kind of performance that I am in love with when I watch certain films, like, for instance, Robert Altman films or Cassavetes films, or, and those are all directors who have worked very closely with actors and have allowed them, have given them a framework which was much more liberating than the traditional way of filmmaking. Now, there's no name for that because every director is using a different combination of screenplay and improvisation. Me coming from screenwriting, I do start with a screenplay that I consider fully developed. And as you have said, it's a very tense film. And, if you see my next film, which is The Rainbow Experiment, that is premiering, by the way, in 5 days at Slamdance. It's a very complex piece with 36 characters. So it's 36 actors and non-actors. In 42 Seconds of Happiness, you have 10. And it has the same kind of, interweaving, intertwining storylines where you have the feeling you're a fly in the wall, where you have the feeling that you're actually in the scene rather than watching something, and something happens to you and you're part of whatever you're watching. So in order to get there, I start. It's a very, I have to have something which I know is going to work very well structurally. And coming from screenwriting, I believe that screenplays are screenwriting, stories, structure. So I have a very elaborate screenwriting process where I'm sure that it works with all those multi-protagonist storylines. And then I basically start a workshop. The workshop has one aim, which is to merge the character and the actor. And that workshop will take a long time. It usually, with 42 Seconds of Happiness, it took me 1.5 years of working in weekly sessions with those actors. And there were no auditions, there was no classic casting, actors came and went, and we basically played, we had, every week I set up 3 situations, 3 scenes, and the intention of that is to see how a certain character will be in a certain situation, how the chemistry between the characters is. How does it feel like for me to have an actor in a certain character's skin? Does it feel right? Does it feel wrong? The actors do not read the screenplay. They have no idea, they're just set up in those improvisations and they improvise. And they are set up in front of the whole ensemble, and there's a very important part after each scene, which I call emotional doubling, which is replacing the classic talkback when you watch a scene, and it's a way that I have, it's a method I have devised to sort of take the judgment out of the talkback situation. So it's not about opinions, it's not about criticizing the actor's choices. There's basically no right or wrong. It's just about being. First of all, that's replacing the casting process. So, but as we go on, I know for sure, who is, which actor is which character. And then also the characters start knowing each other and experiencing each other. And we basically go through their past lives. So they are not told why they are the way they are, but they actually experience and become who they are. Basically, when we reach the point that I feel that we are ready to shoot, then there's the whole ensemble in a way is one. They are they know very well, as if they, in the case of 42 Seconds of Happiness, when we started shooting, they have had all those experiences that they are talking about in the film that you watched. Mm-hmm. They have actually experienced them in scenes. So when they get upset and they say, you're not, you didn't come with me when I asked you to come to court, and that scene they have actually had. They know, they have experienced it. He felt betrayed by his friend. It's not something that he's told by me as a director, but he has actually felt it. And that's, when we start shooting, again, I never give the whole screenplay to any actor. I want to have that freshness of experience for the actors, and I want to capture that freshness. So I only give them pages, and I try to shoot chronologically. The pages, I kind of devise a plan, which is very elaborate about, which pages I'm going to give on which day to which actor, so that they really, it's like information. It's like you're whispering them information for the next step, and that way, the only instruction is cover what is on the page. And obviously, the screenplay is written in such a way that it becomes closer and closer in terms of all the idiosyncrasies of each actor. So, we all talk differently. We have a different way of we prefer certain words. We have a different way of, using long sentences like I do, or using very short sentences. And I try to build this into the dialogue as much as possible, to adjust it as much as possible so that it is more and more like the actor is in real life. And then by the point they get the pages, they sometimes get them like half an hour before we shoot the scene or just before the scene. And it's just about what is going to happen now. the only thing they need to do is to be in the scene with all the visceral information that they have had throughout that whole process. Now, a scene like the gun scene that you just watched, there's a long monologue there. It couldn't be, it's impossible that this would have been improvised, but it still has that improvised freshness. So, the only person who had, who was important to read the pages was Sela, the actress who plays Sela, Laura Pruden, and her husband. That's the actor who plays Mark, because he had certain steps. He had to want to go to the bathroom. He had to, to sneeze. He had to, there were certain key moments that were really important in the structure of the scene. So he had to read it as well. So unfortunately, I spoiled it for them, and they got the scene like 24 hours before, and we talked about it, and. But other than that, everybody else didn't have pages. They just reacted the way they were in the scene. And then just to use it as an example, we did a whole take of the whole scene. Then I had the fresh reactions. Then I instructed them further. Like, one of the actors just left the room. And so for the next take, I said, well, imagine the doors are closed. There's nowhere to go. You have to stay here, right? So, because I had to have them all in that room. So, and that's how and I think we did like 7 or 8 takes. And then a big part of it is in the editing, of course. So then I edited from, the different takes.
How many cameras are you using?
Well, it's interesting because in the Rainbow Experiment, where I'm using the same cinematographer, Dave Sharpless, and we had the experience of 42 Seconds of Happiness, so we felt like, okay, let's do it with one camera. But 42 Seconds of Happiness was our first collaboration, and we weren't as confident that we can do it with one camera. So we had 2 additional cameras, not in the small scenes. There's intimate scenes like when they make love. I mean, we didn't have 3 cameras in there.
I'm thinking like the dinner party.
The dinner party. That's an interesting case because we shot it in 2 long takes of 80 minutes each. So I shot it in real time. They had to drink real wine. They became more and more drunk. They had to eat, it was all kind of, very
it seemed awfully real.
It was very real. And they still had a script, the scene is structured, like a 3-act play. And, each turning point is created or generated by a question that Thomas, the character who plays Thomas, the tall guy, the ex-husband,
the brother
of the bride, he's the one who is the causal agent. He's the one who has the key questions. So he had every one of these questions. Like, are you going to leave, or did you kill someone, or when is the last time you had sex? And these are the key moments where it turns around. So we shot it we started shooting it with 2 cameras. Then we very quickly realized that it's impossible because the second camera was getting into the way of the first. So at a certain point in the first take, we dropped the second camera and had Dave, who is an incredibly powerful guy, sort of, he had his camera handheld on his shoulder for 80 minutes.
So he was just running around, getting all the angles?
Running around, 80, getting all the angles. And of course, sound is very important. Sound is as important as image in my films. So all the actors were mic'd separately. So we had more information on the sound level than on the image level. And we created that, the sound editing was extremely important because you hear, like when you're in a dinner party, you don't see everybody, right? But you hear everybody. And
you hear what's going on at the other side of the table.
Exactly. And you kind of, at least that's because there's people who kind of focus on whoever they're speaking to and they don't hear others. I can hear everybody, and it's very, that's why it's so tiring to be at a dinner table.
And you don't want to miss anything.
Exactly. It's not that you don't want to miss it, but there's something, and you're emotionally involved. Are they talking about you? Are you missing something? Is there something going on? You're kind of always, you're in the middle of all of this. And I want to
is that
create
conversation
that sense.
better?
Yeah. So I wanted to create that sense of, and also the reactions, I mean, there is, I actually, I stole that from reality, that question, when was the last time that you had sex? Mm-hmm. And, I had, when I was, I was with, with my ex-husband and other couples who were all married at vacation. And then at some point, we had too much to drink or whatever. So we started talking about when was the last time. And it was so surprising because apparently, married people don't have sex. So it was, and I was very freshly married. So it was it made a huge impression on me, apparently.
You didn't realize what you were getting into.
Exactly. So I wanted to get that, I wanted to have those, the reactions are just as important as the question, because it kind of feels like, oh yeah, of course, nobody's having sex, and I just wanted that feeling of realization of, my God, and that's, that's the beauty. If this succeeds, that's the beauty of it, because you kind of, it's like the film is a mirror, it's like you're experiencing something, you're seeing something of yourself in there, and a lot of yourself in there, and
Well, for sure, I found myself wanting to jump into the conversation,
but
I wasn't there, and it so quickly made you understand how long and deep these friendships are,
right? Because they were long and deep, they spent
obviously,
a lifetime together. They spent a lifetime together by improvising their lives together. And that's something that you just, I have a great respect for acting education. And it's, most of these actors have had wonderful, they are educated actors and they are working actors. But I think there's nothing that you can imagine or be told that can get you to that kind of performance.
Now, did you train as an actor also?
No, I haven't actually. It's interesting because it doesn't come from from a place where I feel that, I think what it is. I think that writing and acting are extremely close. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit more. How would you describe that?
That writing and acting are so close?
Yeah.
Well, because when you write, and that's the reason why I came up with this whole method, what I did was I put the writer's work from my mind onto the stage. And that's why I call it writer's improv. It's basically when I write a scene, or when I write a screenplay, when I write a scene, or when I teach, how to write scenes, I tell them, imagine, you have to be those characters. They are in your head. You have to be those characters. You have to actually be in that scene. And in order to be in that scene, it has to have a clear structure. So it has to have a clear setup. We go into a scene, we want something. We're not, unless it's a scene where everybody's hanging and they're smoking, weed or something. But apart from that, there is actually an intention. You go into the scene and one of the characters characters want something, and you have an emotion, and the other character has an emotion as well, and something happened before, and what happened before is very important. So what I'm telling you now, which is exactly what you need to know when you start writing a scene, is exactly what an actor needs to know when he starts improvising. So it's identical. It's, this, we kind of come from the same place. And coming from the same place, it's kind of a natural for me to have devised something which is very close to the process of an actor.
Yes, absolutely. The rehearsal process that you had sounds like such a luxury, especially this day and age, and certainly within the studio system, to have that kind of time. And I'm just curious, did you go into this, did you cast the group? Did people know they were preparing for a film? How did you really gather these people at the beginning to do this?
Right. Well, it's different with the two films. And the second film, I couldn't do what I did with the first. In the first, I told them, this is the process is more important than the result. And it's really important to me that we just do this. And there's no aim, we may make something at the end, we may make nothing, and it's just an education for all of us, and it's just fun. So we kind of did every week those this work without a goal. But what I did was I actually shot the rehearsals at the workshop, and then I edited a short film after each rehearsal, and I ended having 42 short films, about 42 seconds of happiness, and I had more material than that at the end, but it was insane. I mean, imagine editing 42 short films, which I turned into, I sort of published them online as a web series. So there was like an audience that started building around it, because, I have so many friends and colleagues and, friends and family all over the world. So they could just, I would put them up on YouTube and, through social media and everything. And there was like a core audience that was interested in that process. So that's, that was really important for that, because, I still have that core audience, and they were the ones who helped us through crowdfunding for 42 Seconds of Happiness, and, who sort of, they were very important, and the film went to festivals all over the world. So, they were the ones who sort of helped promote it every time we went somewhere. And, there were many actors, and we ended up being, the ensemble ended up being those 10 actors. And, one thing which is really interesting, I never replace an actor. So, which is unusual, right? It's kind of, for me, the actor is the character. So if one of the actors, who have become part of that world and are now suddenly unavailable to me, then I will write them out of the screenplay. So, for instance, Peter, I mean, when you watch 42 Seconds of Happiness...
Yeah, they talk about Peter. I'm wondering who Peter is.
About Peter, and it's like, in a classic film, that's like, it's a crime in classic screenwriting. You're never allowed to mention someone and then not establish them, there's not enough gaps. But in real life you get all those gaps. People talk about someone you don't know, and then you start understanding more and more and more, and then you put the puzzle pieces together, right? And that's interesting, and that's so Peter was actually a character that was there throughout the process. And I don't want to spoil it for you because you still have a couple of minutes, but basically there's this character was played by an actor that that was supposed to be he was in the screenplay, Peter was in the screenplay, and then the actor got made a life-changing decision basically a month before we shot, and moved to Shanghai. and it was impossible for him to participate in the shoot. And I basically wrote him out of the screenplay, but he was part of their life, so they talk about him. And I made, I wrote into the improvisations before we started shooting how he disappeared and in what emotional state are they about. So that's what they're talking about, So he's not removed like, sometimes you watch like a TV show. I'll give you an example because I watched it recently, The West Wing, and then one of the characters who is played by Rob Lowe suddenly disappears, and then he was like the best friend of one of the characters who dies in the 5th season, and he doesn't appear in funeral. And in real life, if this character is still alive, he would have appeared because the guy was his mentor. But then a few episodes later, he appears again. So, there's everything is fine as long as it makes sense emotionally for me. So I don't care about all these things people freak out about, like continuity, coverage, as long as the emotional logic is there. That's it.
Well, it seems like you're reinventing the craft a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
I notice it's not the traditional hero's journey.
No.
It seems like something very different. Have you thought about what that, I'm sure you have you thought about what that is? If not the classic hero's journey, what are you trying to do?
Well, what I'm really interested in is that idea of multi-protagonist, because I think that, the hero's journey, which is a very, it's a very long tradition, and or the single protagonist storytelling, that it's kind of I'm kind of tired by it, and I feel that it's not really something that I want to see anymore, and definitely not to to repeat. And I think it's what I'm interested more in is like this idea of truth being the combination of different points of view which you perceive simultaneously, and it's kind of where there's no right or wrong, and where there's no single truth, there's no black or white, there's no growing up and learning curve and all those things that we've been educated in through the single protagonist structure for so many years. And what I'm more interested in is that sense of compassion that you can educate yourself in by kind of accepting that there's different points of view on one and the same thing. So that is something that I'd like to that's what I'm kind of working on with those, and it's not I'm not inventing multi-protagonists. There's been a lot of multi-protagonist films. I think it's a shift in storytelling, and it's kind of it takes us into something which might be a little bit more. Might be more in tune with what is happening to our society and what is happening to us, And I don't dare to call it the female gaze or a different. I do think that the storytelling that we've had for so long, it's a very male, plots-oriented kind of storytelling, but there's women filmmakers who do that as well, and there's men filmmakers who do multi-protagonists. So, but one could call it another gaze. One could call it something else. Yes,
that is kind of where I was leading with my question, because to me it felt like a particularly feminine way, and at the same time, I don't want to be so stereotypical or pigeonhole it, because these things are broader than that. But it does feel very, very different and particularly feminine for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's what is it that makes it that? I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, and it's on the same, at the same. It's also very tense, and it's very, there's guns involved, and there's violence involved, and it's not what what people understand under, what they say, oh, that's a film, by a woman. And
Right.
but I do agree with you. I think it comes from a place which has a different, kind of perception. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something about the tribe and the empathy and the group and and I think we're probably still discovering what all of that means kind of as a society, as we're shifting into, the rise of more
Right.
female perspective in the world.
Right. Yes.
I think it's very exciting.
Exactly. And it's very possible that, what I try not to do is to sort of, copy storytelling that's been there before. I kind of, I like to push the narrative, and I like to push the cinematic language, and I like to sort of see, really risk things, and I without guarantee, and obviously you don't know if it's gonna work out. You don't go the usual path. But yeah, and that's why I'm saying that, for me, it's, like my long screenwriting experience is really important, because I know that all this crazy stuff that I'm doing, that it has a foundation on structure. So, I know that I can, I feel confident I can make it work in terms of the, of the arcs, of the sequences, of the tension, that it doesn't become, sort of boring.
Right. And yet you're not precious about the words. Like, you're not forcing your actors to say the words exactly as written.
No, because as I teach in my screenwriting classes as well, dialogue is the least important thing in a screenplay. The most important thing is structure. That's, the beginning and the end of it. If the structure doesn't work, then you can have the most funny dialogue. It's just going to be a compilation of funny dialogue, or deep dialogue, and it's just going to be, it won't make sense. It's the emotional relationships between the characters, and I don't think that people understand what, because we don't have that education in writing, most of the it's what it actually means. So it's not like structure is not like, okay, so you have to have the first act and the second act and the third act. That's, the 3-act structure. Okay. But there's so much more to structure. There's, you can structure a piece like a symphony. You can structure it like, in musical sequences. Look at Magnolia, which is a multi-protagonist film. It's not, it's not in any way structured, in the classical way, but it still works because, there's parts which are a little bit longish, but it works as a musical piece. It has a musical structure. So, just to give you an example, this is a little bit. That's why I say, structure is the most important part. The words. It's very important. I mean, when you watch the gun scene, they are important. Of course, they are important. And I quote. I have quotes in there which are verbatim, like the downers, the uppers, and the downers. That she says.
The inners and the outers.
Yeah, that's a quote from Woman Under the Influence. Somebody who loves a woman under the influence will catch it, because I felt that, for me, the inspiration for this character was Gina Rowlands.
And that's how people speak. Like, I'm at a dinner party with friends, and we're all doing bits and quoting dialogue all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So, because you have seen something and then you say something, but then there's all the words, because once you have done that preparation and then, you give the dialogue to the actors, actors are very clever. They're very smart people. They will just breathe it in. And that's what I want. I want for them to breathe it in. I'm not going to be precious in the sense of, oh no, you have to say downers before uppers and you have to say out, this is not what it's about. It's about, what do you call me? What do you call me, honey? What do you call me? Don't call me Sila.
Yeah.
The important thing is, don't call me my name, because you call me my name. You don't usually call me my name, but you call me babe. But because that woman with whom you slept is in front of you, you now call me my name. That's, there's so much behind that. And so these words, I'm very precious about, but I don't need to be precious about them because they get it. They are this character, Yeah. They feel in that moment that she wants to establish their relationship and she wants to make sure that this woman understands he calls her babe for their whole life together, and they've had a life together and she's not supposed to be there. So there's so much more behind this.
And it comes through for sure. Now, Can you talk a little bit about your current film that's about to premiere at Slamdance?
Yeah. Well, it's Sundance Slamdance. It's an interesting combination of two festivals happening at the same time in Park City. So, yeah.
So it's called Rainbow Experiment?
It's called The Rainbow Experiment.
The Rainbow Experiment. Mm-hmm. And what is that about?
That's the story of it starts with an explosion. It starts with an experiment that goes wrong in a chemistry lab in a high school, and then it escalates from there. So one of the kids gets hurt and is in the ICU for the whole length of the film. We basically see a whole day after that explosion. And it involves the parents, the teachers, the teacher in whose classroom it happened, the substitute teacher, the principal whose responsibility it is because it happened in his school, the principal that is being sent by the Department of Education to consult with the principal of the school as to how to deal with the parents, the Department of Education that sends in two investigators to look into what happened, and the whole investigation is taking place. It's basically a whodunit with together with how they saw it, and we follow all those characters who are in the pressure cooker, because it's not just this thing that is happening in their lives, but there's other things that are happening in their lives. Life happens, continues to happen, and it sort of escalates into, higher and higher tension. I'm not going to spoil it.
Okay, we'll all go see that. Do you have distribution already?
Yeah, we have a sales agent, which is more than we had when we went into the festival rounds with 42 Seconds of Happiness. Bridge Independent is the sales agent, and Bill Strauss, and he has done Straight Outta Compton, if you remember that film, and
of course.
Actor Martinez. But we're not, we don't have theatrical distribution or any dates yet. We're, it's very early days. We are just starting. Yes.
Great. Now let me ask you this: What do you make of this moment that we're in with women in Hollywood and filmmakers? And
well, I actually wrote a text that is a piece that is going to be in Filmmaker magazine. I don't know if perhaps it's already in there today or tomorrow, but which is called "Time's Up" for the war on stories. And I think it's a pretty exciting moment, and we've been talking about this for many years, and nothing is really changing. And it's really key that we stop talking and start doing. And the question is, what needs to be done? And and there's different things to be said about having more women and more more women making films, but also, as you say, allowing that perspective. Because if it's, more women making films, but then they have to make them with the rules that are not, corresponding to their sensibility or difference, or pushing the language or whatever, then that's one of the factors that will sort of make it more difficult, right? And
that only gets us so far.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of it's interesting, and I'm not interested in moaning or in bemoaning the situation. I'm not interested in saying I'm kind of I've survived over the years, and I'm not interested in sort of saying that again and again the same thing. But I am interested in trying to find solutions like the quotas. Yes, I'm a big fan of quotas. I wasn't when for many years I wasn't, and I think yes, we need quotas. Festivals have to have quotas, studios have to have quotas, agents have to have quotas. How many men, how many women do they represent? We have to have some kind of supporting regulation to be able to get to a point where our storytelling doesn't come from a from a small percentage of the population. It's going to benefit everyone, because the stories that we are seeing, the stories that we are watching, the storytelling is coming from a very small percentage, that of the straight white male, right. and that's a minority. It is a minority if you think about it. So I think that, yes, there needs to be some serious incentive, and not just talk. And it's not just the women that it interests, but everybody. And I think also that we have to look into the past and make some changes there to be able to, do that. So, for instance, think about changing the film canon, adapting. I see sometimes, or no, all the time now on social media, this is my favorite list of films directed by women, and I don't want. It's nice. I like seeing that. Yes, but how about we don't have to say that? How about
here are my favorite films, and half of them were made by women?
Right, exactly. Or we'd use other transitional, like these are, my films made by men. As long as we don't sort of have an equal language, then we're not going to get there, I feel. And also sort of, we do have to change our standards, our academic standards, for instance, because they are based on body of work. I told you I teach film, so it's like, if I apply what I have learned to apply, then there's no way I can include many films by women, because I need a body of work. I need peer reviews. I need, and this just doesn't exist for as many women, because women have very, very different careers based on the fact that they may have started much later than the men, or that they got stuck with one film, so they're the one-offs which are not part of film history, or they may have had 2 films instead of 8, but they might still be very significant, and it doesn't matter, cut them some slack, So that's all really really important, it's part of the part of what needs to be done, I think.
Yeah, it seems we need to attack it from a million different directions.
Yes, and take it very seriously. It is a very serious issue. It's not just a matter of, can women have more jobs and can they get equal pay? These are extremely important, because jobs and pay are what, make you be able to function in society, right? But it's also a matter of, if women and people of color and the other people whose voices are not heard do not become part of that mosaic, of that, if we don't start hearing their voices, and I mean like really, right, on equal base, then there's gonna be always an imbalance, because we kind of, storytelling creates reality. It creates reality. We see how things are done in the films we watch and the TV shows we see.
Yes.
And that's what we copy in real life. That's our reality. We live, we kind of, we start from there. So if that doesn't change, then how are we going to get a balanced and healthy body in a way, where all the body parts are heard and functioning? I don't, it's a stupid metaphor, but I don't.
Yeah, but it's true. The medium is so powerful, and yes, it's about equal opportunity and equal jobs, but it's also shaping culture and helping us understand our world.
It is, absolutely, yes.
It's incredibly important.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for young women who are just starting out?
Just, don't, stick to your guns. Like, really do what you want to do. Sometimes you don't know what you want to do. So you have to sort of try different things and find what it is you want to do. Just don't get intimidated by people with experience who tell you that things have to be done in a certain way. It's important to listen to experience, but you can reinvent, you can push the limits, you can try new things. Cinema is a very young medium. It's very much, what are 100 years, a little bit over 100 years. So we have only, started experimenting, and it feels like we need to be doing more of that. So I would hope that, that would be I think that would be my main advice, especially to young women filmmakers, because they're basically starting out on something which is, on a medium which was governed by other voices. So it's amazing, it's exciting, it's new, it's there to be invented, it's there to be reinvented.
That's wonderful. Are you a success?
What does that mean?
Well, yeah,
Are you a success?
That's the question. What does that mean to you?
Well, one would have to define success, right? Because if you're using the word in the, in the classic way that, the Western society is using it, then you're kind of combining it with money and I am a success. Yes.
Now that you mention it.
No, I think, even, it just triggers me to just kind of think we need to redefine words like that, so it kind of, I jump forward and say, okay, but even in the classic sense of the word, I feel yes, but what does it mean? I think we need to redefine that. And I think that, it's, for instance, where I would feel where I feel most unhappy is if I'm not excited, or if my inspiration leaves me. And there are moments like that. There are days like that, where I just feel exhausted and like, I don't care. Yeah. And that's where I feel the poorest. That you cannot salvage. But if you have that, then everything else is like, everything else you can get. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it feels like the one thing that you need to have is what, that's what success is to me. So, yeah.
Are you a badass?
Oh, yes.
All right, that one needs no further definition, I guess.
I guess it does need a further definition as well, but I think that, both in the good and in the bad sense of the word, it's probably you have to be, I mean, being a woman filmmaker, you have to have, very strong survival instincts.
Yes.
And, you have to sort of keep going, not taking no for an answer, and keep going and not letting yourself doubt cripple you, and not allowing, anything that comes between you and whatever it is you feel sure you have to do to stop you,
That's great.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to meet you. And there's times when I know I'm talking to a real artist, and I'm definitely feeling that with you.
Thank you so much. That's, the biggest compliment you could have made.
Well, I'm going to hang up and go finish watching 42 Seconds of Happiness, and then I can't wait to see your next film.
Thank you so much, and we'll stay in touch. It was a joy talking to you.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. You've been listening to The Other 50%, A Herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Christina Kallas for sharing her story, and special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or Podbay, and subscribe and leave a review, and of course on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out in letters, for added features, bios of our guests, pictures, and merchandise. Please go there right now and subscribe. We're also on YouTube if you like to hear your podcasts on YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook and on Twitter at Other50% and Instagram at Other50% Podcast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.